Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're digging into a huge pile of internal documents from Meta, and they point to a pretty shocking question. Is the company's entire advertising machine, well, is it basically built on fraud?
Okay, let's just start with a number. And this comes straight from Meta's own file, so you know it's real. 15 billion. That's how many high-risk scam ads they think are shown across their apps every single day. We're talking fake products, sketchy gambling sites, the whole 9 yards.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at just how massive this scam ad problem is. Then we'll follow the money. Is this an accident or is it part of the business model? After that, we'll get into the real-world harm this causes, the legal fights that are heating up, and finally, we'll hit on the big trillion-dollar question that Meta has to face.
All right, let's dive right in. Section 1, the scam ad flood. We really need to get our heads around the sheer size of this thing. Because, what these documents show is that it's way, way bigger than just paid ads. So check this out. It's not just the 15 billion paid scam ads we mentioned. There's another 22 billion, with a B, what they call organic scams. This is the stuff that pops up in your feed for free. Fake listings on Marketplace, sketchy job offers, or even a friend's account that's been hacked. You add it all up, that's 37 billion potentially fraudulent things people are seeing on Meta's platforms every single day. It's just mind-boggling.
Okay, so the big question is, how is all this fraud actually turning into money? Well, this is where things get really interesting, because the documents stop talking about this like it's just a problem to solve and start looking a lot more like a calculated business strategy.
Get ready for this number, $16 billion. That's what Meta itself projected it could make in a single year from ads for scams and other banned stuff. We're talking about roughly 10% of its total revenue. Now, when a number is that big, this isn't just a moderation headache anymore, right? It starts to look like a pillar of the business.
And this slide just perfectly captures the huge disconnect here. Publicly, Meta is all, we're fighting scams, we hate them. But then you look at their internal rules, and an advertiser only gets the boot if the computers are 95% sure they're a scammer. Think about that. If there's a 94% chance they're a scammer, they can often just keep on running ads.
And it's not just a passive thing, it's an active decision. There's an internal memo where a manager literally tells the team to be cautious about cracking down too hard. Why? Because the company has, and this is a direct quote, specific revenue guardrails. I mean, that's just a fancy way of saying there's a limit to how much scam money they're willing to give up.
So what about all those advertisers who are super sketchy but don't quite hit that 95% certainty mark? Well, do they get blocked? Nope. Meta came up with something called penalty bids. It's incredible. They actually charge these likely scammers more money to run their ads. So they're not just tolerating the risk, they're literally making extra profit from it.
And look, here's the cold, hard math laid out for us. The documents show that in just half a year, Meta can pull in $3.5 billion from these risky ads. Now, what do they expect to pay in fines for all of this? About $1 billion total. It's a pretty simple calculation, isn't it? The money they make from the scams is way, way more than what they'd ever pay in penalties. It's just the cost of doing business. Okay, so we've seen the numbers, we've seen the internal memos, but what does all of this actually look like out in the real world? Well, this is where it gets really serious, because this isn't about spreadsheets anymore. This is about real people getting hurt. I mean, check this out. An investigation by the Toronto Star. It's just wild. Journalists saw an ad on Facebook. They clicked it. A few minutes later, they'd placed an order for cocaine using a simple e-transfer. And a few days after that, it showed up in their mailbox, delivered by the official postal service, all starting from a Facebook ad.
And it can get so much more personal. There was this case of a Canadian Air Force recruiter. Her account gets hacked, and the hackers start pushing a crypto scam. And because her friends and colleagues trusted her, one of them lost $40,000. And the worst part? Dozens of people filed over 100 reports with Meta, and it still took them a full month to take the hacked account down.
And these aren't just one-off stories. This is systemic. Meta's own safety team estimated that his platforms, Facebook, Instagram, were involved in 1/3, 1 out of every 3 successful scams in the entire United States. That's a staggering admission. So with all this real-world harm, and now with these internal documents coming to light, it's no surprise that the legal and regulatory walls are starting to close in. That shield the company is hidden behind for years, it's starting to crack. For a long, long time, tech companies in the US have had this kind of get-out-of-jail-free card called Section 230. The idea is that they're like a bookstore, not the author of the books. So they can't be sued for the bad stuff, like scams, that other people post on their site.
But that's starting to change. A huge new court ruling, Khis versus Meta, just threw a wrench in the works. A federal court basically said, hey, Section 230 doesn't protect you if you break your own promises. The lawsuit argued that by letting all these scams run wild, Meta was violating its own terms of service. And the court said, yeah, that argument can go forward. That is a potential game changer.
And it's not just in the courtroom. Regulators are circling. Here in the US, the SEC is investigating them over financial scams. And get this, over in the UK, their financial watchdog found that Meta's platforms were involved in 54% of all money lost to payment scams last year. Over half. Okay, so all of this, it leads us to the final section, and it's really the big one. It's the trillion-dollar question that Meta is wrestling with right now. A huge, fundamental conflict right at the core of their entire business.
It's this. Meta is spending billions and billions of dollars to try and win the AI race. It's a massive, expensive goal. But where does that money come from? A huge chunk of it comes from an ad business that, as we've seen, relies pretty heavily on fraud. So how do you clean up the business that's bankrolling your entire future? You really don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, right?
And their own documents show exactly how they're handling it, very, very carefully. The plan isn't to just rip the Band-Aid off and fix it. No, it's a slow, multi-year plan to gradually reduce the scam money. It's a timeline that's been specifically designed so it doesn't mess with their overall profits or, more importantly, that giant AI investment.
So when you put it all together, what these documents really show is that this isn't some mistake or an accident. It's a choice. It's a calculated trade-off between making money and protecting users. And what the evidence suggests time and time again is that profit wins.
And so that leaves us with one last big question to think about. As these massive companies are racing to build our future with AI, a future that's being funded by today's ad business, who's really responsible for the fraud that's helping to pay for it all?